Right, let's get into it. We're going to start with Arsenal. 314. Arsenal rank 14th for successful passes played into the final third. Arsenal have had a tough start. How do you feel about the fact that they're 14th for successful passes played into the final third? Because it's been tricky for them, isn't it?
I'm not as worried as most people about Arsenal, to be honest with you. I think when you saw Martin Odegaard come back on the weekend, that number I expect to jump quite big amounts over the next few weeks when he picks the ball up and sort of surgically takes teams apart. But I think there is an argument to be made that did they get the right deep line midfielder? You know, Mikel Merino at the start of the season has had injuries, but for me looks quite similar to how Declan Rice wants to play. I think Thomas Partey's actually done a pretty good job at the start of the season and maintained some pretty good numbers alongside Declan Rice. But is there an argument to be made that maybe they needed somebody who was going to sit really deep, pick the ball up in the first phase and just be an absolute progressive pass monster from the six rather than Mikel Merino, who is more of a dual monster? And I think that's an argument that could be made about Mikel Arteta in quite a few of his signings.
I think you're right. I think it did all kind of come back together when Odegaard was there. And you could take off Declan Rice and bring on Merino in exactly the same position where, they can pop back and help out at times, but they can also get forward and get themselves in the box as well. The fear for me is the over-reliance on Martin Odegaard. And some people have commented to me, I did a video on Sunday after the game going, wow, like he really is so important to them because he makes absolutely every player on the pitch look better. And some people going, what about Nwaneri? Why isn't he being given that opportunity? Why aren't you playing both of them? That, as talented as he is, for him to be brave enough to put him in there, and he was brave enough a couple of years ago with Smith Rowe and Saka, and maybe they were just that good that you could do it. It feels like he's not as sure this time, and that's a massive problem because, like any player that comes back, are they just going to come back and be fine? Like, I mean, he seemed to be, but with the amount of games that these guys are playing. That would be my biggest fear, is just how much, from a creative standpoint, they've kind of fallen apart without him.
Be braver, man. Be braver. I'm really, really on the side of Nwaneri should have got more minutes in this spell without Martin Odegaard. But Martin Odegaard back in the side now, I struggle to see where Nwaneri picks up any minutes. So if he wasn't going to be used in this sort of instance, then when is he going to be used? I know we can talk about him being just 17 years old. We've seen 17-year-olds have huge impacts in Premier League sides in the past. Nwaneri's being talked about as sort of a generational talent. Whenever he's come on the pitch, he's had huge impacts. Even away at Inter Milan, I thought that they were a much better team creatively and just structurally when he was on the field, even though it was only for a short period of time. I think he should have been trusted for larger portions of this Odegaard injury, to be honest with you, given that he was out, since the end of August? How much can we really say we've seen Nwaneri put imprints on games, other than, was it Preston away? I would like to see more of him.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the one thing I would say is that if you're feeling like the answer is the youngsters, generally something's slightly awry there. Aston Villa 12.36. That is the amount of shots per 90 that Aston Villa are having this season, which puts them 14th. In the Premier League right now. Now, if you go on the Premier League website, first of all, of course, you see a fantastic video by myself on the front page with my name there in text. I'm looking at it right now. It's very exciting. But then after that, if you go to the table, which I'm trying to go to now and I can't seem to find it. I'm too busy. Sorry, I'm too busy watching this fantastic video. It really is so good. We get to the table. Aston Villa find themselves in 9th. Now, a couple of weeks ago, it was considered their best start of a season in a long time. So that lack of shots, what do you put that down to Joe, and how are you feeling about Villa at the moment?
I think they're okay, Villa. I think maybe they've had a little bit of a fallback on last season, which is to be expected. You know, Ollie Watkins hasn't quite started the season as well as I was hoping he would. Maybe that's the pressure being put on him by John Duran. Maybe that's post-Euros tiredness as well. I think you can see that in quite a few England players that haven't hit the same heights they had last season. So Ollie Watkins has started the season a little bit slowly. So has Leon Bailey. I think there's just maybe a few players in that forward line that are underperforming their usual standards. You know, we can talk about shots, even their XG. I think they are 12th or 13th in the league by expected goals. So the numbers aren't classic Unai Emery numbers, but the quality is there in that forward line. Like, I fully expect Ollie Watkins to start scoring goals again and Leon Bailey to start finding his feet again. Morgan Rogers has been a high point, so I'm not overly worried, mate.
Yeah, thing to say, because Aston Villa fans will be screaming right now, they're a point off third.
Yeah.
So I've got a friend, Ali at Maxwell, and he talks about the championship, and he talks about how sometimes he calls it a seeded batch. Basically calls it like a batch of teams from like 8th in the championship down to 20th, and there's like 2 points between them. From third to, hang on, 11th.
13th, mate. Can we get United in there?
4
points.
points. Yeah, if you want to. Yeah, absolutely. So it's so tight there. What I would say is, I think Leon Bailey's a really good point. Like, he was in such form last season, and it does feel like the midfielders, aside from Rodgers, who I think your expectations of him are so because he's a youngster, first proper season with Villa. You're kind of giving him a bit of a free pass, but the lack of goals from, say, Ramsey and McGinn, and the lack of form from Leon Bailey, that's where I'd be a little bit concerned when it came to Villa. But Unai Emery normally kind of gets it done. You do wonder as well, like I'm sort of leaning on history, which I think it's it's valid a lot of the time. The Champions League and it's different to the Conference League where, you're playing Noah FC and pumping them 8-0. I literally wasn't even aware of that team. So it's nice to know of a new team. But like for Villa in the Champions League, that's the sort of the dopamine hit, the emotional sort of dump that you're having in these Champions League games, I think is going to kind of lead to them being slightly jaded at times. And I think that's just something they've got to battle with. So yeah, it's okay. They're fine, but they're not firing, are they? I think that's what I would say.
Agreed.
But few are. Bournemouth, 230. Bournemouth have made the 4th most open play shot creating actions. Bonus stat for you here. Bournemouth 153 have made the most fouls this season. What do you think about? How do you feel about Bournemouth?
I like Bournemouth. Yeah, I really like Iriola. I think the way he plays football is an absolute delight. Luckily enough to actually go down to Bournemouth last week or the week before and spend some time with him. He is brilliant. Such a big character. So well liked by everybody there. And I just think they represent him really well. His side in Spain were one of the best pressing units in Europe when you looked at the numbers, and Bournemouth, forced the most turnovers, I think, in the Premier League, or amongst the most high turnovers in the Premier League yet again. I think that they are a really, really strong embodiment of his vision as a manager, which goes a long way. I feel like at the moment a lot is made of sort of philosophies and what kind of team are they? What style of play do they play? Which maybe a decade ago, I don't remember having these conversations about, what style of play is he? Whereas now that's very important. Iriola, I feel like, has one of the clearest philosophies in the league in terms of his pressing football, trying to win the ball back really high up the pitch, very, very high line. And I think that Evan Nielsen has come in and embodied that a little bit. He started the season quite slowly, but in recent weeks, I think Evan Nielsen is starting to just pop a little bit. There's little signs there that they could have got a really, really good striker through the door. Obviously, Antoine Semenyo continues to be like a shining light, how long they can keep hold of him for. But that team is just packed full of, if we were doing a tier list of the most underrated players in the Prem, I feel like there'd be 4 or 5 strong contenders from Bournemouth to be in like that top tier. Kirkez, Zabarnyi, Senesi, Lewis Cook, Antoine Semenyo, even Justin Kluivert recently. And shout out as well to whoever their set piece coach is. Because on 2 occasions this season, I think they've produced the best set pieces of anybody in the league. I know Arsenal do it consistently, but the corner to beat Arsenal, where it's flicked back and he puts it in. And I don't know whether you saw the corner at the weekend, where it's like 1-2, might be the weekend before actually. Justin Kluivert scores at the front post. It's just beautiful, mate. It's so good, dude. Yeah,
I love Bournemouth. We did a video on them last week because, they're good fun. And it's interesting. It kind of goes against a lot of what you would expect from, a Spanish manager. You think it would be just all about possession. They're not bothered about that. And I think that's actually really refreshing when sometimes and I'm pleased it kind of keeps evolving, because you have some teams that are kind of want to keep the ball. And it does get tiresome. Like,
it's boring, mate. I can't watch any more Pep Guardiola football. Honestly, Arteta, Maresca, let's have some fireworks in the league, please.
I've got to agree with you there, mate. And so the fact that, one, they're getting the shots off, and I think there's a bit of devil in the detail here as well. With the fouls, it's quite cute because one, you look, again, it's positive, you're trying to get at the ball and you're being proactive, and I think that leads to a lot of good things. But making fouls at the right time as well, you've got to get more and more nuance with that because it's easier and easier to get booked. So I think that's an interesting one when it comes to Bournemouth, who I think there would be a general idea that, plucky little Bournemouth. There might be a bit of like devil in them as well. I think they're smarter than people think. A team that beat them at the weekend, though, after all those lovely words being said, Brentford, 0.14. That's Brentford have the highest non-penalty XG per shot in the whole league. They're doing brilliantly. And they, in terms of getting what you can from a game and finding what works for you. Like I got lucky enough to sort of spend an hour with Thomas Frank talking about it, and he honestly, when we started talking about crosses, he just like sort of popped a little bit. Like he obviously loves it and sees it as such a route. Is that if that's something he would do at other clubs if he went to those clubs? I don't know, but I think Brentford are always so smart in finding what works, especially from an XG point of view. And, they're in that batch that we're talking about, which I think at the start of the season, a lot of people were a bit worried about Brentford. And they're absolutely killing it. Visser as well. Like the whole team, like they're just... It's the fact they've got these guys that aren't really names and then they just turn it on. One thing I would say is the home games, the home form, which has been phenomenal, the teams they've played are the teams around them. So that does help a little bit. Playing Southampton, playing Ipswich, of 5 of the 6 wins I think they've got are teams that kind of probably going to end up being lower half. But still, you've got to go and win those games, and they do.
Yeah, do you know what? Jamie Carragher did a great piece on Monday Night Football about the non-penalty expected goals per shot of Brentford being the best in the league effectively. And obviously, you mentioned it there. They don't want to shoot from distance. They rework balls into positions where XG doubles or at trebles per shot. Ironically, unfortunately for Jamie, I think in that game was the one game where Jan out smacked one in from like 30 yards, literally as he'd done that entire piece of analysis, which obviously isn't a great look. But I totally agree with you on the home form, mate. I think the home form's been magnificent. It's one of the best in the league, isn't it? The away form is slightly concerning. Like, slightly worried about that. I don't think they've got a single point away from home yet this season, which isn't a great look. I think the only other team to do that is Southampton. So they need to improve away from home. But I do want to shout out as well Mikkel Damsgaard, who I think has been one of the most improved players in the entire league this season. His ball-carrying ability from midfield has massively helped how Thomas Frank wants to progress the ball. It's helped Visser and Mbermo look better. I think he scored at the weekend, but his all-round play, maybe when he first arrived, there were question marks about whether or not he's going to be able to adapt to the league, because he spent such a long time out with that injury, didn't he? Feels like the adaptation's been made now, and he, behind Mbermo and Visser, he's probably their most important player. He might well be their best player so far this season, which I don't think a lot of people would talk about because everybody immediately goes Mbermo, Visser. I think Damsgaard has been a shining light for him. Yeah,
and to keep out someone like Fabio Carvalho, when you've spent that money on him, that shows that they're willing to do it on merit, but it also shows that he's got something to offer. Carries the ball brilliantly, also knows when to play the pass, which I think is really impressive. Brighton, 493. Brighton have made the 3rd most progressive passes. We've just done a video on the Premier League channel about Brighton's victory over Man City. We've actually, you know what? Bigging up the Premier League. Got a video on our own channel, actually, about them as well. And a lot of talk about this sort of the emptying of the midfield. And sometimes when you see that on as a title or whatever it might be, might be like, calm down. It really is. And again, coming back to having teams that you want to watch. Brighton, with the way that they play, with dynamism, but kind of committing bodies, it's just really, really good fun. And I always hold Brighton up as that team that can allow you as a QPR fan or any fan outside the top 6 to dream, because the way they've built this club in the last decade is absolutely phenomenal, and they're fun to watch. I love them.
Yeah, I mean, Hersler is doing a remarkable job there. He's had some absolutely insane fixtures recently as well, and he's taken points, or at least taken performances away when he hasn't taken points. Even away at Anfield, they caused some real problems in that first 45 minutes. I think they've got some of the standout breakout players this season, particularly Carlos Baleba. Everybody's talking about him at the moment.
Yeah, you tweeted about him, didn't you, the weekend?
Yeah,
well impressed.
When you just watch him and you're like, there's a seriously special player in there. You can just tell it. 3 or 4 touches in, and when he just goes past people like they're not there at Premier League level is a really, really rare factor, I think. So he's definitely going to be a difference maker for them. But some of their signings have arrived and been allowed time to bed in as well, which I think is always important. A lot of teams in that mid-table pack, Brighton now punching above that, but they want to throw these signings in straight away. He's got to have impact straight away. You know, Ritter was kind of eased in there, wasn't he? And he was maybe their record signing, or at least in and amongst the conversation for record signing at the start of the season. Now his energy looks to be really useful to Hurstler. I think they've got one of the most underrated centre-backs in the league in Van Hecke. His ability on the ball isn't talked about nearly enough, and he's vital to how Hurstler wants to build up from the back. So I think overall, the statistic you read out at the start probably rings true because of the quality of players they've got on the ball. Everybody seems so comfy on the ball, from Jack Hinshelwood to Baleba, all the way back to Van Hecke or Rutter or João Pedro. They all want the ball in tight spaces, can take the ball in tight spaces and play. And it feels like they've got maybe 4 or 5 £80 million players in the squad right now.
I thought it was like, I was wondering if they would like Leicester became the club that sell the players.
Yeah.
And look at them punching above their weight. And then it stopped. They kind of ran out, let's say. Like you say, Brighton, there's so many of those assets that they're going to be able to sell and actually not hurt themselves too much. The squad depth is really, really good. And the reason why they've got the third most progressive passes as well is because they swap out the wingers. They've got at least 4 great wingers. They're, like you say, you've got Rutter, Welbeck, Pedro in there as well. And coming back to that Man City game again, we stopped at one moment where we analyse it. Often when you think about that sort of front line, you'll have maybe 5 players, but you might have 2 wide players, a centre forward, and then two 10s. The way that they were playing is they essentially had 6. They had it's like both fullbacks, both wingers, and the 2 forwards as well. So that's why there's so many progressive passes for them as well. Like they're so fun to watch and could really mess up the table this season. I said it.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
They could easily finish third. Easy finish third.
They haven't even got all of their players in top form, momentum. You think of Mats Vifa at the start of the season, at the start of the summer. I was saying this is going to be a vital component to replace Pascal Gross. I think he started 2 games. Gruder has come in as one of the most expensive signings. Has he started a game? If he has, I can't remember it. Matt O'Reilly. Was that his first impact in the Premier League at the weekend? At least £60 million of talent they signed in the summer hasn't played yet, really, or hasn't had an impact on any significant level.
Pascal Gross is a good point because with this change in manager, you don't need him as much as you needed him before.
Yeah,
which is great. Chelsea, so 30. Chelsea have the 3rd most goal scoring actions created from open play, but only have made 1 goal creating action from dead balls. The way I see this stat, I think Chelsea, everyone was hammering them. Maresca has been very clear cut in what he wanted to do. I remember us having a couple of rounds of golf where we were like, more players? And what's going on here? And we kept saying that he's going to have to absolutely sort of cull it to provide some kind of vision and clarity there. And now that group, I do think they're over-reliant from a creative point of view in open play with Cole Palmer. But still, I see that as something that you can work on the dead ball, scoring goals from dead balls in time. To be able to create stuff from open play, I think is very promising for them.
Yeah, well, they hired the Brentford set-piece coach, didn't they? I'm not sure whether or not he's come into the side yet or whether there was a period of notice. I'm sure Chelsea fans will be able to let us know. But either way, whenever I speak to Zach Jalab, obviously big Chelsea fan, he's always moaning about set-pieces. So clearly that is something they've got to work on. I also think they've kind of got to work on a different look when Cole Palmer gets targeted, particularly in the big games, which I think is starting to happen more and more. And I think Malo Gusto's position as that sort of inverted right back in that attacking half space, he's maybe got to offer a little bit more in terms of creativity if he's going to take up that sort of role. And that's probably where Reece James is eventually going to thrive. But yeah, I just think maybe they need a couple different options. And they've certainly got that from the bench. And Nkunku, I think, has scored 10 goals this season, can't get a look in the Premier League. And the same said for Joao Felix, scoring goals in the Conference League. Or not the Conference League, what is it? The third European competition that I've forgotten the name of off the top of my head. But either way, I think that is potentially where the problem is going to come from Maresca. When the January window opens, does Nkunku go, I want minutes. Where are my minutes here? I've not got a Premier League start in the last 5 weeks, and I'm scoring every game that I play in other competitions. I want Premier League minutes. And that's a good headache to have, some people would argue. But when all these players are on 9-year contracts, this is where balancing the squad and the harmony off the field is the big problem for Maresca in the long term. Because on the field, and his communication has clearly been great, with the media, very, very upfront. With his tactics, he's got it spot on. But in the long term, because of the length of contracts that have been handed out to some of these players, will it come back to bite him? I don't know. I kind of trust him to get it right, man. I really like Maresca at the start of this season. I think he's done an excellent job.
Yeah. No, I do as well. I think, as I said, the word I always keep coming back to is that clarity, and him comfortably trusting in that clarity. But also, he's got the players at his disposal to sort of to create with it. I think when he starts to do that rotation, I think they need to get to a point where they're comfortably beating those teams in the bottom half, and then that's when he wants to be doing that with or without Cole Palmer, and there's no reason why he can't, because the quality is there. And then you kind of let the big games be the big games, and you'll kind of see what happens, I think, for this season, and then you look to kind of go again. But yeah, he's done really, really well. Crystal Palace. So Crystal Palace are 18th at the moment. The bottom three at the time of recording: Crystal Palace, Wolves, and Southampton. And Crystal Palace minus 2.4. They are ranked 14th for expected goal difference. So that would suggest that they're being slightly unlucky. Would you agree with that?
I'm not too sure. I was a little bit easy about them starting the season slowly under Glasner, because we've seen Glasner's historic trend. Whenever he joins a new club or at the start of the season, they tend to be quite slow starters. Even when he was in Germany, it was a very similar pattern. But I'm starting to get a little bit jittery about them and the balance of the signings they made in the summer. The replacement for Elise, who I think did put up, 16, 17 goal involvements last season. I'm not sure the balance has quite been matched. I was hoping that Ismail Assar and Eddie Nketiah were going to be able to cover that. But Eddie Nketiah's role feels a little bit sort of forced at the moment.
Yeah,
there's definitely a number 9 there, but he's now not really a 9 because Mateta wants to play through there. He doesn't want to play off the right, really, so he takes up a lot of Eze's spaces. That's a concern for me. Also, was very surprised in the summer that they didn't address the wing-back issue. He wanted to play the back three. They kept hold of Gahey. They bought in Maxwell Slaquar. They bought in Chalobah. But they've really just got Muniz and Tyrick Mitchell in the wing-back roles. I think potentially they needed more attacking threat from those positions. I don't know. I'm a little bit worried about Palace. I think the squad is there to keep them up. There's no doubt about that, particularly in the midfield. Wharton, Doucouré, I think fine. But something's not quite right. The balance is off. And I think that proved out again against Fulham at the weekend. I mean, Fulham should have scored 4 or 5 there.
I agree with you. I think Mateta's missed a few big chances. And Nketiah's a funny one where you kind of think, can he, with Arsenal in a solid side, he could hold up the ball, bring others into play. Prior to that, he was kind of known as a bit of a poacher. So if he goes to Crystal Palace and he can offer both those sides of the game, do you want to start him as that centre forward? And Mateta, who's that, he's thought of as a really, really strong player. So they should be maybe getting a little bit more. I think you nailed it there. I think the wing backs is a problem because you're never really getting in behind the opposition. And the thing that when I look at the table here, West Ham with the woes that they've had, Leicester don't look great, Everton have struggled, Ipswich fighting for their lives, and then you've got Crystal Palace beneath that. That is a concern for me because I think the overall quality in the squad there, you would be hoping for so much more. And I think sometimes it can be a simple answer of really, really missing just that stardust of Elise to get you out of a hole at times. I think they might just about be okay.
I'm worried. I'm a little bit worried about Glasner though. Just the next few fixtures. I don't know if you've seen their fixture list, but Aston Villa away, Newcastle, Man City, Brighton, Arsenal, Bournemouth. That's an ugly run as well. Then they've got Southampton. Then they've got Chelsea.
Yeah.
I would say of the next 10 games, there's like 8 really tricky fixtures for Glasner that he has to start finding something in.
Do you know what I think about with a lot of these clubs? So often I feel like as you're looking to grow as a club and be successful, you're sort of trying to get from like the sort of get it up over that ledge into the Premier League. And then from that, you're trying to like scrabble on to like surviving in the Premier League. And then from there, you're trying to be a top 10 club consistently and you're trying to stay there. It's so hard to stay at any of these different just sort of like spots because when you're a club that's not sort of, let's say a big 6 club, some of your top players are going to end up getting kind of poached. So it's hard to kind of keep that going. I think there's a few managers here where it's the ownership almost have to make a decision of going kind of what section of the Premier League are we in right now? And are we better off sticking with this dude because he's going to give us a good chance, be it next year or this year? And the important thing is we're safe in the Premier League. Or do you go, this isn't good enough?
Yeah.
And get rid.
People forget as well, they've lost to Brentford this season. They've lost at home to West Ham this season. They've drawn with Leicester this season. They've lost to Everton this season. Like, these are teams in and amongst them. Like, these are not teams that are 5th, 6th in the league. These are teams that are battling relegation this season or are considering chopping and changing their manager. So
that's the difference between us talking about Brentford the way we are and us talking about Palace the way we are. Really.
Yeah, dangerous.
Fine margins. Yeah. Everton. Producer Kai, who's an Everton fan, is just to the left of me. I can feel him breathing down my neck. Back off. 95. Everton are ranked bottom. That's bottom for carries into the final third. Dyche ball. Kai, when we chat about Everton, you say the fans are split on Dyche a lot of the time. What's the percentage of Dyche out? 75%, Joe.
That Southampton result, wasn't it, Kai? That Southampton result.
The Southampton result, he says. Is that what it was?
Turned a few.
Is that when they turned? How it happens as well is important.
Yeah, I can see it. I can totally see it. I think at the start of the season as well, some of the decision making over not betting in new signings, the persistence of playing Michael Keane when Jake O'Brien still hasn't really got a look in, the time it took Ilian Ndiaye to start games, I think put a lot of Everton fans' backs up, and now you see the quality of Ilian Ndiaye. It's like you can see why. I do think, though, he deserves a little bit of credit for this new role of Dwight McNeil. I think Dwight McNeil has been one of my favourite players to watch at the start of the season, playing this more central role, far more involved in build-up, far more involved in chance creation, getting him off the touchline and on the ball more has had a big positive impact on Everton. They've missed some huge chances as well, man. Like Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Beto miss big chances, don't they? They've been consistent XG underperformers for a couple of seasons now, and he'll keep them up. But like Kai said, it's like the quality of staying up. How do we stay up?
I know what you mean. And I think the thing to remember as well is, do you know what I was thinking? Sean Dyche kept saying, we need a bit more of the devil in us going forward. And I felt like that was a very direct comment to Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I think when he's sort of a youngster and he's feeling free and it's all feeling fun, I think he's been able to score those goals. And it was a different setup. You had Charlison in there, whatever. Now, I think he's sometimes I want him to be a bit nastier. And I think Dyche probably wants that too, because if he's going to be the guy, he's the size that he is, he's got to go and take games and take goals. And I just don't feel like that's always there with him. The other thing about Everton, I've got to say, I'm really concerned about this December. So coming up, Everton, Arsenal, Chelsea, Man City, back to back. And then that sort of bookmarked? What I'm trying to say? Bookended by Wolves at home and Forest at home, which there'll be a lot of pressure on those two games because of the games around it. And then you got Everton, Tottenham at the start of January, and Brighton, good grief, in January as well. So that would scare me a little bit. But they are solid. They are a solid team. They'll probably stay up, but like just about. And at some point, it'll be like, that's not enough. Fulham, another fun team. 309. Fulham have created the third most shot-creating actions in the entire league.
Yeah, I have to say as well, I had Fulham as like a potential team to go down, or at least be in the fight at the start of the season. Like,
Me
maybe
too.
that's really harsh, but I think the loss of Polinia, the loss of Willian, the loss of Tosin weighed really heavy on my mind, and I wasn't sure that the players they'd signed were the right replacements. Like, they didn't sign a direct Joao Polinia replacement, did they? And that definitely played in my mind as how they're going to set up and evolve this midfield. But Marco Silva clearly had a plan. He had an absolute plan. He's executed it perfectly. This deeper role for Andreas Pereira is an absolute delight to watch. Love the fact that Emil Smith-Rowe can drift inside, can drift to either angle perfectly. Raul Jimenez, I think last season actually was his highest volume of goals since the head injury. This season feels like he's going to blow through that again. So nice to see a little bit of a Raul Jimenez remontada at like 33 randomly. And obviously
Nice, isn't it?
Anderson, just again, very consistent in terms of a signing late in the window. Like, Marco Silva is doing a massively underrated job. I really believe that. Like, they are so good to watch. He has real big impacts with his tactical changes and tweaks within games as well. Like, his substitutions have big effects on matches, and nobody talks about him for big jobs, Marco Silva. Like, he's done a magnificent job at Fulham, given the players he's lost. Think of Mitrovic, think of Joao Polinia, like, over the years. And right now they are...
they're
got
to be at the forefront of
they are
jobs
like
moving
a
forward.
total consideration for a European slot this season. If we're considering Brighton up there, I think Fulham are as good this campaign.
Yeah, I agree. I really love I think the recruitment strategy has been really clever. Like, Reece Nelson, Smith Rowe, Iwobi.
Yeah.
Iwobi's just having the best time. Pereira, like, a lot of players that have been at those big clubs and actually kind of want to go and be the guy, and they would have got to that first team for a reason. So now being there and being kind of given that value, I think that's and not just defending for your lives, you know, just keeping the ball. They've got a lot of techie players in there and a lot of experienced Premier League guys as well. Sander Berge as well. And yeah, I like the centre-backs. Calvin Bassey, I think, is always good. Anderson coming in. Anthony Robinson, we haven't even spoken about. Just so solid. Solid. It's interesting, isn't it? You know, we've spoken about them all now. We talk about Frank, Iraola, and Silva. Those three, like, why on earth would you not give them like a good run at a team that's got a real chance of doing something?
Yeah.
Another manager with a high stock, Kieran McKenna of Ipswich, 59. Ipswich have made the least passes into the penalty area of any team. Absolutely killed me on FPL this week. I thought, Heung-min Son at home. Do you know what? I'm going to try something different here. I'm going to bring him in. He's going to captain, score a couple of penalties, and maybe a third. Life's great. But no, Ipswich had different ideas. But statistically, they are struggling a bit, but they needed that win, didn't they? Badly.
Yeah. I mean, we'll come on to Tottenham a little bit later, but, you know, let's just shout out Liam Delap, shall we? Let's get it out of the way. Yeah. Right, let's shout out Liam Delap. You know, I think he is, at the time of recording, might need somebody to check this quickly, but I think he's the top under-21 goal scorer at any league in Europe. I think he's outscored Lamine Yamal this season in
Wow.
league play. I think Lamine Yamal might have 5 and Liam Delap has 6 goals. Just incredible playing for Ipswich. Like, he's hit the ground so easy, and he doesn't play every minute either. Like, he's subbed some games, he starts other games, he gets taken off. He's been bled into the team by Kieran McKenna, but he has been a massive difference maker for Ipswich, whether it's scoring goals like he did at the weekend, poachers finishes, or whether it's scoring absolute screamers like we've seen him do in the past.
Yep.
I remember watching him, might have been for one of the England youth teams, when he was physically so much more dominant than anybody else on the pitch, and he was just running past players. Now, it feels like he's doing that a little bit in the Prem at times. Like, he's so strong. He just drives with the ball. Lovely first touch. Yeah, for me, Liam Delap has been one of the shining stars, under-21 stars in the league so far this season.
Yeah, conversion rate's about 31%, which is really, really strong. And do you know what? We talk about Calvert-Lewin there. I feel there's a bit of the devil in Delap, if we kind of stay that little bit of arrogance you want to kind of see with a striker, that hunger to prove himself, and having him, you know, he's been in the Championship for a while and didn't really do much. So it's not come from nowhere, because obviously he's got the pedigree of Man City, but it's now finally kind of clicking into place. And maybe that, you know, you've got to give that credit to Kieran McKenna for kind of solving that. I still think there's a long sort of battle ahead, but I think I think at this stage, like, if you're on a bad run or a good run, it really is just about, every so often it's just about the result. Just like Wolves we're going to come to, just get the result. And then we can deal with the rest of it afterwards, because it does really just get rid of a lot of that negativity. Leicester City, 18.4 yards. Leicester have the joint highest average shot distance. So by highest, we mean furthest away from goal. I think it was always going to be an uphill task for Leicester. I think other people kind of felt like they had a better squad than I personally feel like they had. Now, they're outside of the relegation zone, and they've had sort of some of those tight games against their kind of rivals around them. They've actually been able to pick up some points. Obviously, the Southampton game is one that comes to mind in particular. And he's actually he's kind of stuck with a bit of, or reverted back to a bit of like the Maresca ball in terms of having those wide players in there. The midfield lacks a bit of creativity for me. That's the thing I would be slightly worried about when it comes to Leicester. Yeah, I can't. If someone's going to drop in, if you're going, Palace will be fine and Wolves will be fine, Leicester would be one of those teams that I'd be very concerned about.
Yeah, I feel like the fans haven't taken to Cooper either. Like, I think that Steve Cooper, he's taken 10 points already so far this season, which is actually a pretty good tally. It's a pretty good tally.
Yeah.
And they have scored some big late goals. You think the Ipswich goal, like you said, the Southampton goal, his use of Wilfred and
Did he get a late one against Everton? Leicester City. Yeah, late-ish. Sorry,
his use of Wilfred and as a 10 has been pretty interesting. I'm not sure I would continue to do it throughout the entire season. Obviously, we saw it a bit last year in the Championship as well, didn't we? But
he missed a sitter, didn't he, at the weekend? I think that's something. That's a good point. When you talk about Gusto earlier, it's like, okay, they're like in build-up play, or they can get into the right positions, but do they have that sort of striker's mentality or the attacking player's mentality to get you the goal? Because it's all good and well getting them there. They've got to put the ball over the line.
Leicester fans, though, like, are they happy to just grind out the occasional point and potentially stay up, on sort of 35 points, which they're kind of on course to get?
Yeah.
Or do they want more? And I think Leicester have the issue of being Premier League winners in the past, that have FA Cups in recent history, have finished high in the Premier League. They have that mentality of a Premier League side. So how long are they willing to accept being very much the B side under Steve Cooper? I think it's an interesting balance and one that is tough for him.
Yeah, I think they were like the last decade for them has been an anomaly. Like, that's not the Leicester City that those fans are kind of aware of, right? That's why it's such a fairy tale story. So I think this is probably, I get what you're saying. You're right though. When it plays like, I don't want to dig out Jordan Ayew because this is edited by Palace.
He's scored some big goals, mate.
I know he has, but it's just sort of like you say. You use the word grind there, like it's lacking a little something, isn't it? And when we talk about kind of style versus substance, I think actually Leicester City fans would kind of go, look, like I said, let's just stay on this ledge. Let's not drop down. Let's get through this season and then move on from there.
Big shout out though. To Facundo Buonanotte, who again has been one of the loan signings of the season so far. I mean, another Brighton player, isn't it? It's another Brighton superstar, because he just has carried Leicester through games. His finishing's been great. Creativity around the box has been fantastic, and probably been Leicester's best player. Brighton just the conveyor belt.
I know, it's crazy. Liverpool, 2,844 yards. Liverpool have the highest total progressive distance per 94 passes, despite only being fifth for progressive passes per 90. So that means the distance of their progressive passes are larger than others. So what that kind of means is that they're getting that ball to Salah pretty regularly, or Gakpo or Diaz on the left-hand side. I think Liverpool are interesting in they're sort of contradictory in a way that works for them, in the sense that they'll hold onto ball a little bit deeper, and if they can play through you, then great. But if they can't, no worries. We've got world-class players. We'll just pop the ball over the top and we'll hurt you that way. I don't know. I was thinking about it. If they won the league, Liverpool fans, I hate this. If they won the league, I wonder how lauded they would be. It's that kind of juxtaposition between...
Oh, they'd be lauded, man. They'd be lauded. They would be...
Of course they'd be lauded. But I think in terms of like all champions of all time, it will be a team that... It's really clever, like that they sort of hold the ball at times, and then at times they go, well, we don't seem good enough to play through you right now, so we're going to hit the ball over the top. I'm absolutely fine with it, but I'm intrigued to see how people will look at it as the season progresses, because it's a great weapon for them to have to create space for themselves.
Totally agree. I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because I've seen some people online starting to downplay Liverpool far too much. Like, I've seen a few people online when the 10 games hit and they had, top of the league. I was hearing the Ange Postecoglou. Remember Ange Postecoglou last season? Top of the league after 10 games, 8 wins, two draws or something. He was flying, wasn't he, Ange? At the start of the season, we had Spurs players on the middle of the pitch, families there doing this towards the fans. Like, people talking as if Slot and this Liverpool side could experience the same thing Spurs did, and I just don't see it. They've got the experience and the quality within that team that have been there and won it before. So even without Slot at the helm, I think he's done a magnificent job. I think a lot of the players in that team can carry them over the line in games, particularly Mo Salah, who is just, having one of his most remarkable seasons in the Premier League. I just think that they are going to really, really push this league title very close now. And I didn't think that at the start of the season. 84, 85 points might be enough to win this league.
I think that's the point I was going to make. I think
that
you need
is
less points than ever
perfectly gettable
before.
for this Liverpool side.
Totally agree. If you want, I did a whole chat with Lawrence McKenna about Mohamed Salah on the podcast. So if you want to check that out, that's on the feed. Whilst you're there, follow the podcast. Make it bigger. Manchester City, 47.4%. Manchester City are ranked 17th for aerial duels won percentage. Funny little time for Man City. Now, one must beware thinking that Man City are falling off, because they have done this several times in the past. It does feel a little bit... Well, the fact that Rodri's not coming back, that's the big one here, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think they're much easier to get at physically. Like, maybe it's the slowing down of Kyle Walker, or maybe it's the lack of Kevin De Bruyne, or the Rodri injury. But
the midfield, I think the midfield
players,
lacks physicality.
Yeah, I kind of agree. But
Gundogan.
I just don't think it'll matter come the end of the season. Like, I'm still just totally convinced that Pep Guardiola, being the greatest coach in the history of football, will find a tweak, and that tweak will probably come in November or December, where he'll change one thing, a player will slot into a position, and they'll just be unbeatable again. Like, I've seen this story so many times with Man City where there's been a problem. There's no Kevin De Bruyne, and the creativity's down. The wide players aren't performing. I've seen it. Like, the underlying numbers are still super strong. Like, I just think Pep will fix it. Pep finds a way to fix everything. He's done that throughout his entire career, every club, every season. There's no reason to doubt him, and people seem to be doubting Pep. Like, I'm seeing people say, "Oh, Pep looks jaded." It's like, man, just don't ever say that against Pep. Like, Pep at the weekend when he was having the argument with Van Hecker, I thought, the fire's still there for Pep.
Yeah,
Pep's going to sort this out, man.
I think that when you look at that lineup, the thing for me is Gvardiol, incredible, but I mean, has been playing left back at different times. Then Simpson Pusi, who, like, he's not going to play. There's a big level up to Ruben Dias or Akanji or John Stones. It's 3 options. Kyle Walker, this is what I would say. Kyle Walker, Ilkay Gundogan, maybe even Kovacic. And Kovacic's done all right. At some point, and De Bruyne you could chuck in there as well, although De Bruyne's numbers are always great, but is he always fit? That's a different question. At some point, there has to be that decline. And if it's all happening to all of them at the same time, that becomes an issue. Matthias Nunes, him being the left winger in a Pep Guardiola side, it's just not.
That's odd, isn't it? I think that's I found that a little bit concerning. The fact that Jack Grealish has been called up with the England squad, travelled with the England squad, appears like he's ready to play with the England squad, and isn't getting.
But he wasn't on the bench. He wasn't even on the bench.
Exactly. That concerns me a little bit. I think my biggest concern about Manchester City, potentially, forget the physicality and the defensive issues that I'm just still convinced Pep will sort, is maybe the goal scoring behind Erling Haaland. You look at the numbers. He contributes to far too high of a percentage of their goals so far this season. Like, Savinho needs to start chipping in with goals. Gundogan needs to refine his goal scoring form. Where has the Phil Foden of last season's goal scoring form been? These players need to start putting the ball in the back of the net, because they're still XG leaders in the Premier League, but they're not scoring at the rate they should be. So I think if Haaland gets injured, we're talking serious problems here. Serious problems with no Julian Alvarez in the background and nobody else scoring goals in the team. So I think Pep will fix it, but they need a bit of luck as well.
Yeah, I think the Alvarez thing as well, like, forget him as like how good he is, or for a second. But in terms of having another player kind of within all that to allow Phil Foden to creep up in different areas of the pitch and therefore get his numbers up, I think that's something that they're missing a little bit. Man United, Joe's club, minus 6.3. Man United are ranked 19th for teams underperforming XG. Do we just draw a line, though, under all of that?
No, I don't think you can, to be honest with you, because the same personnel is still there under Ruben Amorim, and it's been a consistent problem, not just for one season, but for 2 or 3 seasons. United's goal scoring has not been good enough. Don't score nearly enough goals. Didn't hit 60 goals in a Premier League season under Erik Ten Hag once, which is nowhere near good enough. And I do think there is pressure on Rasmus Højlund, Marcus Rashford, to score goals under Ruben Amorim, because United won't be scared to pull the trigger and sign another forward. If they can afford one, and Amorim wants one, they need to start scoring some goals. What I will say is that I do think the goal scoring numbers will climb quickly under Ruben Amorim. Just the way he wants to play football, the positions that Rasmus Højlund receives the ball in, I think will change drastically. If I see Rasmus Højlund back to goal, 40 yards out, wrestling with a centre-back, trying to turn him one more time, I'll claw my eyes out. Please, can we get the boy in the box? Somebody cutting the ball back to him. Somebody putting the ball across the box to him. Putting a cross into him. Because he constantly receives the ball in the wrong areas. Same with Rashford and Erik Ten Hag, who was as wide as physically possible. Let's get the forwards into positions they can have impact in the games. So what you saw at the weekend with Amad Diallo, played way more central. Same with Bruno Fernandes, way higher up the pitch in areas they can have effect on goal-scoring areas. Like, too wide, too deep. Change that. I'm not going to swear, but change that now, and I think you'll have big impacts, because people forget Rasmus Højlund scored 16 goals last season. Even if he
with no service,
with no service. So if he hits that number with some decent service, I think there is big upside to him.
I tell you, we've got a whole, without trying to push too many videos, we've got a whole video talking about it. I passionately agree with what Joe's saying here. And what would be a shame is him leaving the club at some point without you really knowing if he could have made it or not, because right now, I have no clue if he's good enough or not. But now with Amorim, I think is the time for him to catch fire. Newcastle United, 1.64. Newcastle are ranked 16th for crosses into the penalty area, which is interesting considering how their attacks were modelled on Trippier's crossing not too long ago. He was an FPL must, a sort of deep-lying playmaker almost, even from that right-back position. But the new iteration of Newcastle, which is starting to kind of grow teeth a little bit with Livramento and Lewis Hall, who's getting a lot of plaudits at the moment. I think it shows that there will be a slightly different way of playing, and that the amount of crosses will calm down here, which might lead to, there must be a sort of a reason behind it. I think it's obviously different personnel as much as anything. But that might be some good days and some bad days when it comes to them. I think Newcastle is kind of up for grabs in terms of how good they are.
I think they're good. I think the noise around Eddie Howe now dying down around the England job will help them. I think the fact that he will have settled into that relationship with Paul Mitchell a little bit more now will help them, and that Paul Mitchell will have time to plan his recruitment for both January and the summer will help them. Last year, it was a mess. Summer was a total mess. Start to finish. The Dan Ashworth issue didn't help them. PSR was a disaster, losing Minter and Elliot Anderson in the manner they didn't help them. The lack of signings.
Both would have been integral this season,
exactly,
actually.
At 100%. So I'm absolutely fine about Newcastle. Still think they're an absolute nightmare to play at St James's Park. They've got one of the best young strikers in world football in Alexander Isak. Anthony Gordon is a constant problem. The only issue they've really got is the balance of the front three. Like, how do you fit Harvey Barnes into that equation? Because he's still electric when he's on the field, in my opinion. Same can be said of Sandro Tonali. How do you fit him in? Because the win rate jumps right up when Sean Longstaff plays in there. I know that Newcastle fans don't love him, but it's just a fact. They are a more well-balanced team with him on the field. And all of this comes into the backdrop of not having Sven Botman for the last 9 months. Dan Burn playing in centre-back when he's not really a centre-back, alongside Fabian Schär, who's had injury problems. Newcastle are fine. Like, they are going to be contenders for a European spot.
Okay, interesting. Bullshit. Nottingham Forest. Well, 11.2. Forest are ranked second for expected goals against. What season they're Forest at?
Nuno.
Oh.
I love it, man.
Mate, I was wrong about Nuno. I presumed it felt like it had all the ingredients to go totally wrong. But to give myself not credit, but like give myself a break. What I did say is that it's now. Like there's a squad there with some players there that if they want to have really strong careers, now's the time. Show us. And obviously Chris Wood's been on fire. I don't put him in that conversation because he's had a fantastic career. But around that, Elliot Anderson, Hudson-Odoi, like there's some real Alanga, obviously, Gibbs White, who we know is a really talented player. Murillo is a young player, which people probably forget. A lot of players there that are just nice, good, steady players. And if it can kind of click and they can all, again, I think a bit like Fulham, they can feel, there's a lot of players here that are kind of looking at these top teams and going, no, we're not afraid of you. And I think Forest, Nuno's done brilliantly. I thought he was I thought he could have been the first to go. I think I would put that forward. But yeah, I've been totally proved wrong. I think they've been brilliant.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I love how they've set up. I think the counter-attack works perfectly for them. The recruitment was excellent in the summer. Elliot Anderson, people kind of were looking at fee, but when you take into account they managed to get Vlachodimos going in the opposite direction for £20 million, and it's sort of a £15 million transaction. It's an amazing bit of business. He's been remarkable for them. But also Milenkovic, like the perfect foil to Murillo. Just so good. Ola Aina being able to play on both flanks, fantastic. Even Alex Moreno, who was the forgotten player at Aston Villa. When he first arrived at Villa, he was so good. But then fell out of form. Luca Digne gets that position locked down. He's been brilliant for Forest. Forest,
he's great guy.
Such a great story. I really, really hope they do well across the second half of the season, because if they do, a lot of the players in their ranks, like you said a minute ago, Jimbo, will be eyeing up potential options in the summer.
Yeah, the one thing I do wonder, they reek of a team that does really well to February and then falls off. Just chucking it out there.
Maybe, but they've got a goal scorer, man, and a goal scorer makes all the difference. Chris Wood, I think, is one of a handful of players, maybe like double digits of players that have scored in 10 plus goals in 5 seasons in Premier League history. His goal scoring record is not to be sniffed at, and he will do it again this year.
And when you analyse him, obviously he's not the quickest, but this sort of use of his sort of little faint body movements to kind of get just that yard to get that shot off are really, really impressive when you have a closer look at him. Southampton, 15. Southampton have made them 15. They've made the most errors leading to an opponent's shot.
I love you said that as if you were surprised, Jim. That's the least surprising stat we've read out today.
No, I know. That's just a high number, bro. That's a high number.
Where do you stand on it? I totally respect Russell Martin. I think he should stick by his philosophy. Are you of the opinion that he needs to mix it up?
So we've got Southampton, Tottenham here, and I think there's you could kind of put it the same on both. I think the thing I would say, you could say someone like Cameron Archer, who was at Sheffield United last year, did nothing, and Sheffield United hung in there. Often were kind of in games, and then sometimes were in games and then kind of fell apart. Like with Southampton, yes, they are. I think it's sort of when to just go, right, okay, now we need to be that little bit more. It's just the tiniest bit on the dial. I think the dial's a little bit too far. And I think there's moments where, yes, go and play, try and play, keep the ball. Because if you've got the ball, they haven't got the ball, and you're going to concede less goals. They've also been incredibly unfortunate on several occasions.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
If they just hang in there, they're not going to score the goal.
I think that's a good point.
They haven't got the quality. They haven't got enough quality to not own the ball.
And I think when I say that I back him and he should be sticking by his philosophies, I think that his philosophy has to be semi-adaptable to the opposition. And I'm going to talk about this with Ange Postecoglou in a minute, but, I don't see Southampton staying up playing this way, but maybe he gets a bigger job. And I think that is the level that's the balance now, isn't it? In the modern era, is does the manager who plays this way get the bigger job in the future because he's played this way, even though his team have gone down? We've seen that with Vincent Kompany. Can he replicate that same thing, Russell Martin?
But I don't think he's doing that to get, like some people say, he's doing that because he wants to get a better job in the future. I think
he's doing that because he believes it keeps him up.
Yes, exactly. And I don't think it's the worst way. The problem for both is that you've gone so, when we talked about philosophy earlier, you've gone so far committing to a philosophy, you've kind of backed yourself into a bit of a corner here.
I also think that he's gone so far of sticking by it without changing it that it hasn't adapted with the time. Like last season in the Championship, they conceded loads of goals. I think they had a similar sort of record to Birmingham City. Like, not a good enough defensive side. That needed to be addressed. Even if your philosophy is to keep the ball, we're going to play out from the back, this is how we're going to defend and attack, fine. But have the realisation that we weren't good enough defensively in the Championship. Something has to change to that next level, even if our philosophy is going to be a ball like dominant side.
Yeah, I think it's just moments of being maybe just that little bit cuter. Tottenham, but they have been really unlucky. I stand by that. Tottenham, 3. Tottenham have conceded 3 goals from dead balls, which is the joint 3rd highest in the league. That is what it is. But I think sticking with the kind of Southampton conversation here. Do you know what? I was watching the Ipswich game, watching the highlights of it. And it's funny because actually Troy Deeney spoke about it afterwards on Match of the Day too. But watching the game, I was like, it's so much hard. Anyone who's played football, it's so much harder to run back as opposed to running forwards. And I think that's where Tottenham are getting hurt sometimes, is just understanding, like, they're not robots. Like, there's going to be moments, and it can be so simple, it can be so tiny. There was a moment, and I've definitely been there. Bentancur, for a second, he's tired. So for a second, he kind of just, he doesn't go straight away like, raging animal. He goes, "Oh, I've got to go, haven't I?" And it's too late. Like, and that's a thing that I think needs to be a little bit more understood with Tottenham at times when I guess they're playing so much football and it's such a long season, is that it is. I do think like when you're attacking, it feels like you're running downhill. I've gone the wrong way there. Whatever. That when you're defending, to have that energy, that mental fortitude to get back, it is that little bit more of a slog. And sometimes they need to be a bit smarter. The other thing I think is really important, actually, and I don't think anyone said this, I don't mind everyone pressing, getting at the ball, but not your 2 centre-backs. There's a moment with the Ipswich game, might have been the goal or not, I don't remember, but it's happened so many times. Romero does it as well. Their default, if you're the centre-back, I think sometimes, okay, you've lost the ball, you are the last line of defence. Get back. But the 2 centre-backs, or all the centre-backs, it's always like, go forwards, just run at the ball. And it's too easy at the highest level. But every other player, fine. But that last line, those 2 centre-backs, for me, sometimes they go, okay, I've lost the ball here, I need to retreat. And that is something that is, I'm just seeing it time and again with Spurs, and it's killing them. I think it's killing them.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one on Ange's philosophy here. Because again, I was lucky enough to speak to him a few weeks ago, or a month or so ago, and he's really, really entrenched in it. It's Ange ball idea, and fair enough. I think, I said the same for Russell Martin. If you believe that's the way to go, then you believe that's the way to go. I think the difference with Southampton to Spurs is, at Southampton, you're going to be underdogs in 99% of the games. So if you believe that philosophy is the best way of winning those 99% of the games, fine. Maybe that's Russell Martin's idea. At Tottenham, it's maybe you are underdogs in 20% of the games. It's a 20-80 split. So you have to be adaptable for that 20%. You have to be. You have to be able to change it up to some element. Even Pep changes it up to some element in 20% of games that he feels like are different types of matches. They do adapt and change, even if they are wedded to a philosophy 80% of the time. And Tottenham don't do that. They don't do that ever. Like, they cannot have gone behind in 13 of 15 league matches.
Wow.
Like, that can't happen at home. Like, every home game I watch Tottenham, they're 1-0 down. Even if they turn it around, they are losing games from silly positions. And I think players that have come in haven't either adapted to the system brilliantly or are just too big of a drop-off. When Mickey van der Ven doesn't play, the line height doesn't change. Like, Mickey van der Ven's speed allows you to be 15 yards higher at the pitch. It just does. So when Mickey van der Ven's not there, just accept I'm going to drop 10 yards deeper here. I don't have the covering pace in behind if I'm Radu Dragosan. It doesn't happen. Yeah. Against Galatasaray, it was honestly shambolic. Like, it was genuinely shambolic. Victor Osimhen, who is one of the most explosive, powerful strikers in world football, had 40 yards of room to drive into around the back of the defence. Like, it can't happen at the very, very elite level. For Southampton, maybe it can, because that's how you're trying to defend without the ball, and with the ball, to be honest with you. But Tottenham, just change a couple of little details now and then. Like, even Vicario's positioning from corner kicks has got to change. Like,
Yeah.
get him off his line. Get him off his line. He's 6'6". Get him off his line. If I see Vicario pinned under his own crossbar one more time for a set piece this season, I'm walking out and never watching Spurs again. Seriously, I can't do it. Like, just tweak a couple little things, because overall, all of the metrics trend positive for Tottenham.
I agree.
They all trend positive for Tottenham. All of them are better than they were last season, be it goals, shot numbers, defensively. They're all better. A couple of little things, and they could be so good, Tottenham. But it just doesn't feel like those details.
But it's back to that thing of like, he's so like, that clip with him talking to Rio about, and he's going the scoreline. Don't worry about the scoreline. Just keep playing the same way. For 10 minutes here and there, maybe just be that. I think that's my point. Is it because he's so, like you say, so entrenched. He's not allowing himself some smoke and mirrors to kind of get himself. Allow for nuance to kind of get through and maybe give a different message.
He's done
here
such a good job there, Ange. He's done such a good job, and I'm really interested to see if he can go to that next level. Because when he arrived, I didn't think he could do it, but now I'm very much of the opinion that he's doing it right. But it just needs 10, 15% of changes to be an absolute superstar team.
Right, West Ham 6. West Ham have hit the post more than any other team this season. Lopetegui probably... Oh, here's a question for you. Is Lopetegui the most in danger manager in the Premier League right now?
I think he's part of a trio alongside, Russell Martin and Steve Cooper that are all probably pretty in danger. And Gary O'Neill could slide in there, I think, as well as the quartet. But it's interesting, isn't it, that Premier League clubs seem much more reticent now to bin managers. Like, I think a few years ago, there's absolutely no doubt you would have had 3+ sackings this season. Whereas Premier League clubs now, I don't know whether it's PSR or whether or not it's that they think statistically, and there is some sort of data analytics department that tells you that sacking your manager doesn't have as big of an upturn as you think. I'd be really interested to see the numbers, because that's definite change in recent seasons.
Certainly in the last 2 years, I remember like a couple of years ago on YouTube, like October, November, like,
sacking frenzies,
sorted, aren't you? Yeah,
absolutely. Sacking frenzies now, it's dead, isn't it? It's dead.
Yeah.
But
easy
equally,
views.
I think Lopetegui is probably the most in danger manager, because they had a summer that a lot of us thought was really strong.
Spent a lot of money.
They spent a lot of money, and he's got the David Moyes factor, who splits opinion amongst West Ham fans, but is undeniably consistent. Like, fans will say, well, we got us European football, we won European Cup with him. Like, that looms quite large over his head, whereas clubs like Southampton, Leicester, Wolves don't have that high level of, we should be up here. Whereas West Ham have that expectation ingrained within the West Ham way. Don't they? We're not playing the West Ham way.
Do you know, I think what's fair to say, though, is that name for name, they absolutely need to be better. Like, they've actually probably got more points than they deserve from the performances that we've seen. And so, although they have hit the post a few times, like, kind of fair enough, I'm struggling with him, I'll be honest. And we sort of looked at how he would set up, and when we were talking about it, we were kind of going, well, he's not overtly different to sort of David Moyes. He wants to have the ball more, yes, but I think when it's not adding up, something's not adding up, because the players that are there, the names that are there, are good players. There's a lot of good players in that team.
So much quality,
something's not right. There's so much quality.
So much quality.
Not right.
I even felt like the Kudus reaction to when he was getting involved in that situation, something wasn't right there either. That felt like an expression of frustration at not just what was going on the ground. That felt slightly off. I think, the use of Somerville has felt slightly off, hasn't it? Even to Debo taking so long to bed into the side hasn't really worked. I don't know. Everything just feels like it's out of kilter there.
Feels like they get run through the midfield as well. They look slow in the middle of midfield.
Like some of the names they've been linked to replace him. I just don't really know what West Ham want to be. And I think that's a major issue.
Yep, and it was the issue last year, and it continues to be. I'll be absolutely... today, if you ask me, like, will he get to the end of the season? I'll be absolutely amazed, personally. Wolves. According to Opta, Wolves have had the highest fixture difficulty in terms of starts this season. They got the victory against Southampton. We spoke about it earlier. I was kind of alluding to it because it was on my mind when it comes to Wolves. Enormous. Was it fully deserved? It's close, because especially when you look at the goals are, it's a bit cheeky, isn't it? Certainly one of them. But it's just like, get the win. Who cares? Because that team, that group, I think can be better than they have been. And the run of games that they're going to be able to embark on now could get them back into that, 12th to 15th position. And then they can calm down a little bit. And actually, you wonder with Gary O'Neill, the aim for him really, weirdly, is like getting to a point where, well, I think there's a bit of a ceiling when it comes to Wolves, but getting to that place where they're kind of safe again. And if it gets to a point where, maybe we need to go and take that leap for a bigger manager, and Gary O'Neill's kind of survived there, a bit like what happened to him at Bournemouth, then he's kind of done his job, and he's done well to survive. I think they're better than the points.
They were scuppered by a really poor window as well, weren't they? I mean, Wolves classically have been a selling club, but to sell Max Kilman in the way they did, who else left?
Neto, of course, for a lot of money.
Yeah, Pedro
I mean,
Neto.
they had
to sell
time
their two
to
best players and not replace them was a killer for them. There is an over-reliance on Matheus Cunha in that side. He's comfortably the best player in the side. Every time I watch them, I think he's way, way better than a bottom half relegation type player. His ability on the ball recently, his goal scoring has been excellent. I mean, the finish of the weekend was just
4 and 5 or something.
Ridiculous,
yeah, amazing
wasn't it? So he's blessed with a couple of standout players like Matheus Cunha. I think Ryan Aït-Nouri as well definitely has a very high ceiling. But I also think they've been a bit funky in terms of why did they try to go to the back four at the start of the season. That was clearly something they worked on all pre-season. They lost Max Kilman. Never really felt like it was working, did it? Didn't really fit the wing backs. Semedo feels like more of a wing back than a full back, and Aït-Nouri feels more of a wing back than a full back. I don't know. I didn't like the move to a back four personally. I think they look way better with a back five.
Yeah.
And
but they're still with the back. They're still sticking with that back four. For now.
I'm not sure, mate. But I think that's more down to the fact they've, Mosquera also did his ACL, didn't he? I'm not sure they've got enough.
They're just light
manpower at centre half to go to about five now. Overall, though, maybe they'll just be fine. But I'm not convinced, mate. I think there's problems there.
Do you? Interesting. I think they'll be just about fine. But that win against Southampton was just so important. So next up, Fulham, tough away. Bournemouth, again, tough actually, to be fair, despite being, a smaller name, let's say. Then Everton, West Ham. West Ham, if they've got a new manager by now, at that point, that's like...
Mate, do you know there's so many tough games in the league this season? Because it feels like an exponential increase, because from about 1 to 12, the sides are all really good. There's very little to separate. Brighton from Tottenham, honestly, or Villa from Newcastle. United are comfortably the worst of that top 13 side when you actually watch them play football, and Ruben Amorim's just arrived. So it's wow, the pressure to beat teams and the lack of easy fixtures in this league is incredible this year.
Yeah, you're right. It's going to be interesting to see what the sort of spread is when in terms of that final number that will keep you up, and that final number that will get you into the top four, and that final number that will win you the league. I think it's going to be really, really interesting. And it's been interesting chatting to you, Joe. Joe, you've got great content on your channel. What's a video that people might enjoy that is available soon or currently available?
Do you know what? I put out a different kind of video today. A video called In Defense of Alejandro Garnacho, where I was, not happy with some of the treatment Alejandro Garnacho has had recently on social media and in person from certain sects of fans. I don't know if you saw the video, Jimbo, of him being abused outside the stadium. So it's kind of a little bit of a takedown of some people.
Did you see the beautiful video, though? Did you see the beautiful video with the kid?
With the young kid. Yeah. Very nice.
If you go back and watch that, watch how he hugs that kid.
It's very nice.
Really got me.
Very nice.
Really,
but basically,
he needed the hug. Garnacho needed the hug.
Took a few statistics and a bit of a deeper dive into Alejandro Garnacho and what we should be expecting from 19-year-olds in the Premier League at his caliber. So go and watch that if you've got time.
Yes, make sure you do. There'll be a link in the description to Joe's channel. Joe, thank you so much. If you want to give us a follow wherever you get your podcasts, in particular on Spotify, that would keep my bosses happy. Check out all the other podcasts, and we'll speak to you guys very, very soon.